I'd like to call this special meeting for the Great Island Advisory Committee to order on September 9th at 5:04 p.m. Board of Selectmen has a meeting right after this. That's why I'm here with John, because frankly, I didn't think I could get back to town hall quick enough. So some remarks from me, really excited. As you all know, because you're all getting the emails, we have about 100 people that have signed up for the bus. And I do recognize that this is filling up your inbox, and we will work to find a solution for it going forward on reservations. But that's terrific news that we do have a lot of people that are interested. So we've had a number of people that have reached out to their various groups. I can just look here. Kip is looking at the boat club. Lori is doing the Norotan Yacht Club. Dan is doing the Norotan Presbyterian and the Darien Men's Association. Mark is in charge of the RTM. I have reached out to the Tokenique Club and the Tokenique Association. Jeff is working with the Scouts. So for anyone that hasn't come forward with a group that they'd like to reach out to, if you could let me know. But now you know which groups we've already looked into. Michelle has done a flyer, a really attractive flyer. So for instance, Kip, if you want to put a flyer up at the boat club, or Lori, I'm not sure how the yacht club feels, but there is a nice visual that's available, or you can always share the news release that we did. We also had Town Hall actually also sent out to all of our boards and commissions a request that they share that information with their respective members of their boards and commissions. So instead of just waiting for people to see this via the newsletter or social media, I think we have 9 people on this committee. Actually, we have a couple more that are here all the time. Looking at you, John. So if you could reach out to your respective groups, and if you've already identified and you have another one, that's even better. We do have about 115 spots left on the bus, so there's plenty of space there for people to come. Ed's going to go over the tree hearing, but I'm encouraging people to come on the 12th and at 6 o'clock in room 206. The tree hearing for 23A. And just as a heads up, I like to let people know when there's going to be activity on the island. We have Reed's, their surveyors for their architectural surveyors. There'll be one surveyor and one drone operator on the island from 9 to 12 on September 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th. So if anybody asks you why there's a drone flying around or camera, that's what's going on. Okay, that's all I have right now. Ed?
Yeah, good afternoon. Just 2 quick items. I'll turn it back over to you after that. Planning and zoning met last week to hear the application on the orchard remediation turf establishment. That went well. Their decision is tomorrow night. They say there's no need to attend. It's just a decision. Public hearing is closed, but I may peek in on that while they're doing it. Second, the orchard bids are due the 19th, and once I have approval, hopefully tomorrow night, and a qualified bid on the 19th, I can get started out there after the 21st. I'm starting to do that work. Second topic is the lot 23 access driveway tree hearing is the 12th. It's at 6 o'clock in room 206. Plans have been sent out, notices sent out, so it understand it'll be well attended, but like every good public hearing, I understand I've gotten and seen some of the residents that are in favor of the access being widened and addressing public safety and opening of Great Island. So it should be attended by both factions. And that's all I have.
Hey, Ed, I was thinking about the orchard, and I want to bring it up now because you know, I know you don't like to do work twice. So instead of capping it and putting grass on, what if we turn it into like a natural flower pollinator pathway kind of space? And I feel like that, you know, we have the eagles over there, so this could keep, you know, could help people to kind of stay far enough away from the eagles. There's that. And I think the pollinator pathway for the island would be terrific, and it gets a lot of sun. So the plants should do pretty well. What do you think about that? And do we, if we're going to do something like that, when do we need to make that decision?
Well, I mean, you can decide now. You can make that part of your programming on the 21st to get input on the folks. Not knowing how that area will be used, that is one good alternative. All I'm really planning on doing is topsoil and seed and hay. If a year from now we have to scrape that up a little bit and put down some more topsoil and, you know, and make it plantable, I just don't see that as a negative then too. So it really depends on how the September 21st turns out, to be honest with you. Maybe that's something a lot of people would want to see down there.
Okay, so we don't need to make that decision now.
Not
I see Jim, 1 second.
Not
right now?
No, I can change directions after the 21st. I really can. If
Okay.
that's something that a lot of people are talking about and you want to have me make a change out there, I can.
Okay. Jim?
Hey, Ed, could you send around the application that went to P&Z just so the group has it for you know, for the work?
I will do my best.
Great, or just even like the link to the website, just so we can see exactly kind of what's being done.
That I can probably do better.
Perfect.
Okay. Any other questions for Ed? Nope. Okay. Next item is to discuss a pop-up polo event. So I circulated a memo. Thank you, Linda, for helping with that. We've been approached by a group out of Westport, and they're interested. They do polo matches over at the Westport Hunt Club, and they're interested in seeing if this is if our site is a viable option. So it would be a polo event. I'll give you kind of the rough. We're still working with Park and Rec and Department of Public Works on some of the finer details, but it would be on October 26th. That's kind of the, you know, kind of towards the last viable date. Approximately 200 people. We're looking at considering the same kind of model as we're doing for the September 21st meeting of some bus transportation onto the island, and then people can walk on. It'll be, you know, the thinking is a polo, you know, perhaps you come and you watch a polo practice and then a couple of matches. And there'll be some kids, you know, activities for kids, face painting, pony rides, that kind of thing. Food and drink will be available for purchase. Perhaps some will be provided at no cost. And I think I think it'll be a really great way to reach another group of our Darien residents that might not go out there just to take a walk. So with that, I think I've spoken with everyone, but I'd like to open it up to your thoughts and any questions you might have. Jim?
Hey, Monica, I think I saw the on the agenda, just given that the next item is going to discuss like overall access, get a presentation from Reed. Does it make sense to kind of push this item just because this involves like getting more people on the island, access where they go, that type of stuff? Should we swap 5 and 4? I know we can't add or subtract given that this is a special meeting.
You know what? Yeah, you know what? This we do, if we're going to go forward, we need to move on this evening because we need to make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. And at our evening tonight, just time-wise. So does anyone have any thoughts or questions other than that?
Well, hi, I'm sorry, this is Mike. I know we had spoken positively about before, but like,
Mike, you're really breaking up.
on the island to
Hey, Mike.
see if it has feasibility.
Mike, you're really breaking up. Okay, well, Mike is, yeah, John's gonna text you. Mike, we can't hear you at all.
Monica, I just want to make clear what I was saying is that I'd like to move the discussion of this to after the discussion with Reed, the first of which is going to be around
I'll let you
access,
guys
and how we're going to open that
continue. I
up.
apologize.
So that's what I was asking to do.
Okay.
Monica, can I ask,
Sure.
there will be no need for town staff to be involved in this, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, because I'm concerned that there's a lot of demands on our office staff here right now and will be for some time, and we really don't have the extra hours to devote to an event.
Okay, but I have reached out to Park and Rec and they have offered some great.
I'm talking about my staff.
The day of, got it. Yes, understand.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts? No?
Well, I guess so, Monica, I just haven't asked that or made a motion. Can we not discuss this after we have the broader discussion around access? Or
Okay, I'm just wondering why we would do that.
is the next item, maybe I'm just looking at the agenda wrong here, but I thought the first thing that Reed was going to talk about was like access.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I just thought if this is kind of part of access, does it make sense to talk about that first? But
Well, I look at this as a pop-up event. It's a one-time thing, similar to if we did a hayride or something like that. So I'm not sure where the access discussion comes in, but since you've asked a couple of times, do you want to make a motion to switch number 2 and number 3 on the agenda? Or 4 and 5 on the agenda?
yeah, that's what I guess, so technically a motion.
Yes, do you want to make a motion?
I'll second that motion if I am back on the airwaves. Apologies again, I'm on the train.
Okay. All right, all in favor of reversing the order between number 4 and 5, putting number 5 next? Jim moved, Mike seconded, all in favor? Okay, unanimous. Okay, thank you. Okay, next item will be an access update. Becca, I think you're up first.
Happily, yes. Hi, good evening, everyone. So we will start sharing our screen right now to walk you through this. And just, I guess, maybe give us one moment. Here we go. And if we advance to the next slide, there are 3 of us that'll be speaking for our team with you this evening. Meg and I, who you're pretty familiar with, and then we invited Celia here this evening because she's really our branding expert, so we can have a fun and lively conversation around that. And I think in terms of the biggest items that we're looking forward to discussing with you this evening, there's this access issue, Jim, that you're raising as it relates to the pop-up events and other ways to expand access to the island. Then what Celia will lead us through related to branding and logo. And then somewhat briefly, and this is really an advanced discussion before the outreach event on the 21st, we'll be sharing with you sort of the ways of thinking about possible futures and scenarios for the island. And then we'll have a little discussion after that section. And the Meg will give an update on the focus groups and the outreach event and surveys. And that'll bring us to the end of the evening. And we are hoping that we can definitely end on time, if not a little bit early with you this evening. Let's go to the next slide. So in terms of access and the goal of expanding access and really having the island serve the community as quickly and fully as possible, I think, you know, we talked in the last session we had together about the opening of the bridal trail. And I think that is very much planned for this month. And I guess, Monica, I would ask you to maybe add any specific date whereby we would want to actually open that. It could be very soon, but I think that's our sense is that we absolutely want to open the bridal pass this month, and the specific date is something for discussion this evening. And then we thought, in addition to that, we wanted to talk about the pros and cons of potentially expanding access beyond that. And there are 3 areas for consideration. First is the polo lawn, which definitely would be part of the experience if there was this pop-up event. The next is the main house lawn. And then the final part that's currently closed to the community is the beach area. Go to the next slide. Oops, thanks. So in terms of opening up the bridal path, I think this does seem quite straightforward and will really create, I mean, this is such a beautiful part of the island, and for people who like bird watching and other activities, it's a huge addition to their experience on the island. The one, I think, pretty serious condition that comes with this increased privilege of access is to keep everybody onto the main dirt path. And that's for the safety of the plants and the animals that, you know, we're sharing the island with, as well as for people's own safety. And a kind of matched condition with this is that the access to the beach house area would be blocked off. So any complications with the beach would not be part of this experience. If we go to the next slide. So for the, for the polo lawn, we actually feel that it would be excellent to open the polo lawn up for activities. And I think there's a way in which this space just feels so inviting for people to do all sorts of kind of passive recreation. It has great views, and we think that the community can take really good advantage of it as the fall sort of takes off. So I think the 2 issues that have come up as requiring some additional attention from the town would be trash management. If you allow picnics, it's hard to not allow picnics is something that we would suggest because it feels so much like a picnicking environment. So there'll be a kind of enforcement issue we anticipate if you say no picnic. And then the maintenance of the grass and lawn, there'll be more pressure on that as more people are using this space. If we go to the next. The main house lawn also feels like a pretty terrific place to open up to the community. One of the things that we love about this is it really does give you that sensation of being kind of at the end of the earth and really on the water. It also the sort of romance of the estate and kind of the imagining of what it's like to perhaps live or really spend relaxed time here is enabled by opening this up. I think it comes with some of the same challenges related to trash and lawn maintenance. The question of whether or not to have food or how you're going to enforce it if you don't allow food. And then there is the need to create barriers to keep people off the main house terrace and the stairs and to ensure that the house is locked and so there are no safety issues there. I think there's one other issue to be aware of that comes with this. I think in general, as access to Great Island has increased, the goal has been to offer things that you don't ever have to take back. And because the main house has many possible features associated with it, as we're testing programs and governance and sort of operations or cost models, there is a possible future with, let's just imagine, let's say a hotel or something, where part of the main lawn may go back to a little bit more private condition and sometimes can't come out of the public realm. So that's a supplemental consideration for the space. If we go to the next slide. So the beach house area is another area that we spent some time thinking about whether or not it would be good to open up. And I think our feeling is that it would be nice to open it up. I think immediate fabulous pro to that is that it's an actual beach condition that suddenly is open to public. So experiencing the water, walking on the sand, super appealing. The cons of this are that it is a small area, and so just making sure that it's cared for as it relates to if people leave trash or anything like that, that's necessary. And then just like around the main house, there's a need to block off access to unsafe stairs and the platform and the beach house itself. So with that, I think is the kind of final area that we wanted to discuss in terms of increasing access. And I think with that, it seems like perhaps we should go to the next slide, which is more about just the website and digital access and the goal of actually launching and making live the website link, which I think could be done as soon as tomorrow if we decided that that was an important thing to do in this meeting. So with that, I will stop my comments and invite discussion from the committee.
So Becca, do you think it would be helpful to take one area at a time?
I do,
Okay.
but perhaps if there are any general comments about this, we could take those first, and then we could walk through each space one at a time. And do you want me to take questions or do you want to take them, Monica?
Oh, I think whoever can answer them best, but I would just say that I'm really hopeful that we can move at least on some of this. I think that we really want to get people there, and offering people additional reasons to go, I think will go a really long way. So I hope people will see this, and even if it's just, I know we can move on the trails, right? We can probably get those, Ed believes by the 21st. So our event on the 21st could include a walk on the trails. And we can get them in walking shape and get the appropriate signage. And some of the other areas, there's not as much work required. Maybe that tennis court needs to be looked at, but I think it's more signage, and we're getting information from our insurance people on what specifically they'd like to see out there. So great job.
I actually took the guy out today to Great Island, and we looked at all those spots with him, which was very helpful. He'll be able to help us with this.
I have a general comment, Becca, which, before we break into the individual sections. I think that those the three locations on the island are excellent. And then, I mean, that's the bulk of the island, really. I mean, those three spaces, other than like the stables, but those are the three main parts of the island. And then I guess what I don't really understand is since it's basically the whole island, then why are we breaking it down? Like, I think we have certain rules in place that say, like, you can't bring dogs or you can't bring bikes, but that's saying you can't access the island at all with a dog, which I get. And we'll revisit those types of rules at whatever time. But as far as like, once you come through the gates, where you can go on the island, I don't know why we're really legislating that and saying you can't go off the path on the bridle trail, because I mean, like, we don't do that at Cherry Lawn or in Selleck's Woods or in Woodland Park. And if somebody sees like an interesting tree, yes, if there is, if there's experience that we find going forward that there's an overburdened part of the property, I think we could change our reasoning on that. But to make a rule that, I don't know, it just seems like we're if we say, okay, we're going to now add these three things, I just don't, I don't see those woods being tremendously different than some of the other woods we have in town.
Yeah, Bruce, that was in part, like, I sent around an email to you guys all like a couple of weeks ago. I was going to ask Becca, rather than talk about like those three areas, why we included them, trying to understand why did we exclude the other areas? Because I'm kind of working backwards from opening in as much as possible up. So I want to understand, like, if there are certain areas like behind the house, but not to the side of the house, like where the statues are. Like, is there something about that we say that's not a safe area?
I think there are a number of hazards, basically, that we're still trying to understand. And I think the risk I think there are two big goals that we have in mind as how we're going about this. One is basically a sort of, let's not do any harm to anything that we don't fully understand, that we could maybe not be able to bring back if we haven't understood it and it gets injured. So I think there's that approach. And sort of related to that is this, like, trying to be generous in the unfolding, but not so that we give everybody everything. And then as we get organized about exactly the vision and the plan, suddenly there are these carve outs, because let's just say that getting this all to work with a governance and cost model that is right for the community means that there's some areas that we have to remove from circulation, then that will feel punitive. And I think the whole spirit of this is to be generous and that it's a gift, and we don't want that to be part of it. So I think those are kind of two big areas, and then there's this like risk or life safety issue to people, and we don't want to have lots and lots of barriers and tape everywhere where we know that there's something that's a tripping issue or something like that.
But I think in what you're proposing, if we only open up that little polo field in the little area behind there, I think we then need it blocking off everything else. So I just, as a person like in the community and elected 19 years, I feel like the questions I'm being asked are, why are we not have access to all of these areas, rather than just explaining, well, this is why we added these two areas or three areas here. It's.
I think we've looked at these closely enough that we feel that we won't do any harm, that it's going to be safe for people, that we won't likely have to take them back out of a communal realm. And that, as you said earlier, by offering up this group, most of the major experiences of the island are on offer. So that the things that are most joyful and wonderful do become part of the community experience. And I don't know, Bruce, if that helps, like, between my answer, if that helps answer. And it doesn't say, you may be not satisfied with it, but that is the framing of the logic. Lori, you have a comment?
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, I just want to mention that I did have a friend mention to me the other day, I won't name names to protect the innocent, but she very excitedly told me that she and her husband had walked the bridal path because another one of her friends had watched our last meeting and interpreted whatever we said to understand that the bridal path is now open for business. So I just want to make you aware of that. I told her I didn't believe that to be the case, but so if we see recordings of people going on the bridal path, anyway, there's some understanding from folks that that's already open. I just say, with regard to keeping people on trails, you're right, in the parks, we can't keep people from going off the trails, but our preference is certainly that people stay on the trails, whether it's in Woodland or Selleck's or the back area Cherry Lawn, because it protects the habitats. It protects different types of plants from getting tromped on. It protects, the animals nesting. even things like, seedlings that are, from acorns dropping off tree and reforesting, whatever. So are we going to stop people from doing what we don't want them to do? No, it's impossible. We know that, but there are reasons to try to keep people to the paths as much as possible.
Lori, does the Parks and Rec
Because it does
Commission,
protect the environment.
does the Parks and Rec, and maybe I'm ignorant because I'm back there all the time, but does the Parks and Rec Commission actually have signs up there that says you can't step off the paths, when those great paths that we have back behind the park?
No.
Or do we?
And our experience, I don't know, this is not a rhetorical question. Is our experience that we're seeing any kind of degradation to our assets currently, that we would be thinking of telling people that they can't leave the paths in Selleck's Woods or Woodland Park or
I think our experience is that most people do stay on the paths.
And I think
Reason,
that's
for
gonna be
instance,
the
that we want
experience.
dogs on leash in the nature preserves is because we don't want the dogs running into the woods and then their owners have to go.
I mean, I think that's
After
the
them.
point, really, exactly, is that I think 98% of the people are going to stay on the path, on the bridle path and stuff too. But if some teacher has given some elementary or middle school kid a tree identification project, and they happen to be walking out there and they want to leave the path and go take a picture of the bark on a certain tree for a school project, I just don't understand why we're legislating this and saying we're writing a written rule that you are breaking, and I just don't get it, really.
I mean, Monica, maybe you can answer. The residents that we have on, it's only a couple left now, but are they restricted from going on these other areas currently?
Yes.
So, but they're not restricted from like having dogs, because I see people out there like.
Well, none of the tenants currently have dogs. And one of the reasons that we don't have the whole island opened up is because we do have tenants. Another reason is because we will be doing some arsenic cleanup and we don't want to have to take back that property. So I think what Becca was saying is really, it's really an important point, and that is that we never want to say to our community, you can no longer do this, right? And I think rolling this out in a controlled fashion, I'm all for it. I think opening up these areas is terrific, and we're moving forward. Okay, we're moving forward in a thoughtful manner. So
Okay,
I
so
support
this is, I'm sorry, this is Mike. I understand the point, but I think if there are areas in the rollout that are going to be excluded, I think we need to specify why they're being excluded now and give some sort of facts. We're not doing this now because A, B, and C. So we can then know if later on, if those conditions do not exist and it's not a problem, then it can be, open. And so if you want to eliminate areas in the rollout, that's fine, that you might consider later, but like we really need to have a very detailed factual basis as for why we're doing that. And that's my thought.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for these areas, we have looked at them to see what the hazards are, and we have taken measures or discussed the measures with the relevant people in town who protect all of us to make sure that those are safe and aren't likely to cause problems for anyone. And what we have not done, because it's a large island, is gone through the due diligence to ensure that the entire island is able to meet all those standards, and that will take longer. So I think to the extent that there's a hope to open it up sooner, there is a process about how you have to look at things to make sure that there isn't, I mean, this was a home right for a family. It has not been brought up to code for a public environment. Yeah.
I hear you on that, Becca, but before you guys were hired, when we made this rule and we were considering access to begin with, we limited, one of the reasons that we decided to limit people to staying on the roads was because we had some work to finish in going through to make sure that there wasn't like rebar sticking out of the lawn or something like that. And so we've had the better part of a year to do that work and to understand that. So it's, I think it's, I hear what you're saying, but we've been doing that for quite some time now.
Yeah, I mean, I personally feel, I mean, I get stopped 50 times a week. I feel like I need to have an answer. I need to be able to advocate. This is why we said you can walk on this area of the property and not this. I mean, that type of, I feel like articulation, I mean, listen, I think it'll help as part of these upcoming community engagement scenarios. But I think it's just, I think it's the right way to kind of go about it. Again, defining, giving good rationale as to why we're not doing certain areas rather than just doing this. And I guess maybe just from a process standpoint, I don't think we can really vote on access tonight, right?
No, we're just discussing it.
Yeah.
But our plan is to have the trails open by the 21st with appropriate signage and the trails in the appropriate condition.
And
My
wait,
view
why
is
couldn't-
if we could open up the 4 identified areas, we're giving a tremendous amount to the community in terms of the type of recreational activities that they can conduct with their friends and the family. I would be support being allowing people to picnic, because I think that's a key thing people want to do. They want to come with their kids. Kids want snacks, kids want drinks. We're going to have to figure out how to manage the garbage, which is a challenge. We're going to have to get garbage cans out there, pick up whatever. That's an expense to the community. If we open up everything, that's more places for garbage. But just in my experience with Parks and Rec over a whole lot of years now, the bad actors are going to do what they want to do, but I think putting some limitations around it and not having people crawl over every area. John, you know, we've had conversations with neighbors about some of the parks and the partying that goes on and the hundreds of beer cans and stuff happens. And I think putting some kind of guardrails around it while still giving people to sit in front of the mansion and enjoy the spectacular view, to be able to kick a soccer ball with their kids, for an artist to set up an easel and paint, to have a picnic going into the fall season. I think we're giving people an awful lot that will help them experience the island while putting a little bit of a governor around it, because there will be people, let me just say stuff happens, trust me.
Well, Lori, I think we need to be consistent with the way we're doing stuff elsewhere. I mean, because there's one bad actor that you may have heard about in one park or
Yeah, there's more than one.
It doesn't mean that we should restrict the other 20,998 of them.
Okay, well, you know what, folks, I have an eye on the clock, and there's more than one bad actor. And I just want to remind everybody that we have cameras everywhere. And so we have all kinds of people that are doing what they're not supposed to do. So may I suggest that for this evening, we support opening up the trails on the 21st with the appropriate signage and the conditions being brought up to the appropriate level. And we wait for our insurance people, who John and I met with today, and John took on a tour today, to come back to us with their specific recommendations on the other parcels that we mentioned. And we revisit this once we have those answers. Does that meet with everybody's approval?
Well, Monica, to my point earlier, it's a special meeting, so I don't think we can vote on making any changes. I think the only action item.
Right, we're not actually voting on anything.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And, but I would just say that the bad actors are going to do what they're going to do, regardless of the rules. And so I think what we need to do is, even if we allow people off trails and things like that, then you're still not going to be allowed to leave trash or beer cans somewhere. So that's just an enforcement issue. That's and they're going to do it. And those people that we're talking about are going to do it, even if the rule is that you can't leave the trail.
Right. Well, Bruce, to your trail discussion, because that's relevant, because we're moving forward on that. you know, I hear Lori and I hear Becca that that's a pretty sensitive area. It hasn't been stepped on. And I think we have an opportunity to look at it in its pristine manner and then go forward. And once people are walking in there off the trail, we lose that opportunity. So I would suggest asking people to stay on the trails makes perfect sense. And if the kids want to do a tree outing, I'm sure that Becca will help make that happen. Okay. Okay, so we're going to move right along to branding.
Yeah, thank you.
Thought we were doing the event, the horse event as the next agenda item. The polo event.
Well, these are all under
After access, it was going to be polo.
no, because number 5 is everything from Reed Hildebrand. So we're going to have to circle back to the polo event when we finish this discussion.
But it fits quite naturally down because our last chapter is outreach and all the different ways that we're engaging people. And so and even, you know, one of those is this idea of a pop-up event. So I feel like just making sure that, I guess a question is, how much time do we want to allocate for that conversation, just to make sure that we move through other things as quickly as possible? Should we try and preserve, 20 minutes for talking about everything at the end?
Probably a good idea.
Okay.
Yes.
So, branding, Celia.
Thank you, Becca. Awesome. We'll try to cover a lot, but briefly. So to reiterate our goals, we really approach this wanting to focus on this incredible ecological resource that we've all been talking about, that the island is, as kind of the overall theme. And visually, creating materials that feel both elegant, but also friendly and approachable. This vision plan, workshops, everything will be promoted to a really wide range of people, different age groups, different backgrounds. So we want it to feel really interesting and engaging for everyone on all these different levels. And just super quickly before we jump in, when we use the word identity, we're referring to kind of this whole system of components that together represent the vision plan. So logo, typography, photography, color palette, if there's taglines, diagrams, maps, how all of that fits together to tell one cohesive story. Next slide, please. So we'll run through these 3 options today and then open it up for discussion after that. Next slide. So this first identity we're calling Habitats of Great Islands, and it's derived from the 5 main ecological zones that we have on the island. Next slide. So here's a map looking down on the island, and we have these different areas highlighted by color. So grasslands, we can imagine maybe portions of this become meadow, forest, marsh, rocky coastline, and tidal flats. So it's really amazing that we have these 5 different ecologies in this space, and that became the basis for our design direction. Next slide, please. So we can represent those proportionally, like on a pie chart. Next. And we can also take those pieces and further simplify them into something a little more geometric and nicer to work with. Next slide. And using those same forms, we can create this unique G shape that's made up of those 5 component pieces. Next slide. So you can kind of see the hidden G in there. And next. So this is what it looks like in one color. And it's interesting, we've showed this to a few people, and some people kind of see the G right away, and for others, it takes them just a minute. But especially when it's next to the word Great Islands, you kind of make that connection a little faster. And we think this is really interesting because it kind of gives people the opportunity to have like that little aha moment where you're like, oh, like I see the G, I get that. And as we'll show, we have like a few opportunities for those moments in this identity. Next slide. Just a closer zoom in showing the visual relationships between the icon and the typography. We chose a typeface that is kind of rooted in classic typography, but it can also feel fresh and modern depending on how we use it. And this is actually the same typeface that we used for the flyer. Next slide. So we'll just flip through a few examples of layouts showing how we use color, photography, typography, and illustration, just to give you a sense of how all of these pieces come together to make up the identity. We imagine using lots of the beautiful photography and very simple, elegant type. So you can flip. A few more examples. And for this, we were also interested in the potential to create custom illustrations that showed these 5 different ecological zones together in one little scene. So we could see one maybe fun community engagement idea might be to invite local artists of Darien to create these little images. And then you would have this library of artwork that could be used on posters, social media, website, other promotional materials. Next slide. So here you can see if we took those 5 zones and kind of cropped it onto the G, we imagine someone might look at a graphic like this and kind of have that aha moment of where the logo comes from. So they're seeing these 5 pieces and realizing that each piece is actually a little habitat, and they all come together to make the logo. So it's like, you know, when someone sees the arrow and the FedEx logo for the first time, it's that little moment of like delight and surprise. And it's nice to be able to give that to someone. Next slide. Just a couple examples. I think we can have some really creative posters using custom artwork, or maybe some more elegant classic ones using beautiful photography. Next slide. These were a few early examples of some workshop materials. We won't spend too much time on that because we're developing the real ones right now. Next slide. An early study of workshop boards using that same typography, just something very simple, clean, and elegant, and inviting. Next slide. And again, I think having a map at the workshops, we talked about this as an opportunity for people to connect those 5 different zones to the 5 pieces of the logo. So just kind of further reinforcing that. Next slide. The mark can also be used to create this really fun pattern, which actually has an interesting relationship to some of the architecture, that geometry that we're seeing around the island's buildings. Next slide. We can see this, for example, being used in colorful banners, just an interesting juxtaposition of something that is pretty modern and bright against this more classical architecture. Next slide. We can also see these going a little more simple, bringing in that green, dark green, something that feels maybe a little more classic. Next slide. And we showed a preview of the website, so we won't dwell on this, but just looking at the logo in this format, kind of at a simpler scale. Next slide. We also have a series of little badges that were created from the same geometries as that logo, with fun sayings on them for children. We can see these being used maybe as stickers or patches as a part of the kids' workshops. Next slide. Just a few more examples of workshop collateral. Kind of throughout all of this, we were thinking about how the identity could adapt to these different audiences, right? So how does it look on like a children's coloring worksheet, for example? Next slide. A study of a little passport booklet that we're making, and a map, and that sticker sheet. We're having a lot of fun developing this for the workshop right now. Next slide. You can also see this on a t-shirt, on hats, maybe one that features some of the illustrations, or maybe something that's more simple. Next slide. So overall, we've tried to show really the flexibility of this direction. We can see it feeling very classic and elegant, or super fresh and fun and modern. And all of these depend on the application, right? So I think some things will call for slightly different languages. So we think that whether it's a really fun and colorful banner or activity for kids, or something that's a little more understated, like the website, there's just a lot of flexibility in the system to make these different things work. Next slide. So that was our first direction. We also included 2 earlier studies as we were developing this, just to show you a little bit more of our process. So this next one we called Elements of Great Island. And it was an attempt to kind of further distill the zones of the island into their most basic parts. So next slide. And we defined that as sky, or the air element, the forest, or the land element, and the sea, or the water element. And next slide. And we came up with a representative species for each. And this was, Monica had a good point that she had actually never seen a terrapin when we showed this to her first. So I think if this was a direction that you all chose to pursue, we would kind of hone in on what those actual species would be. Next slide. Looking at it all together as the logo. Next slide. And just a close-up, looking at the visual relationships between the mark and the typography, which is a different typeface than the last one we showed. Next slide. And using a similar color palette, very simple typography, and really enchanting photography. Next slide. Just a few more examples of layout. We definitely didn't dive as deeply into these 2 versions, so I think we just have a couple more to show. For this one, we can see maybe bringing in some botanical illustrations, or something that feels like a field guide, since it is so focused on the wildlife. Next slide. Website, you can flip past that. And again, just some early studies of workshop materials, thinking about how this appeals to children as well as adults attending. Next slide. In our last study, so the third identity option, we called the Flag of Great Island. And this was an attempt to combine kind of the main components of the island. So the architecture, the forest, the sea, the wildlife, into kind of a classic pennant shape. Next slide. So you can see how we've kind of combined them into one little illustration, that it's in this classic looking flag. Next slide. Next slide. And the same as the first 2, we're using a lot of photography, really bright, welcoming colors, a lot of greens and blues, and very simple typography. Next slide. Another version. Next slide. Awesome. And I think that might be maybe our last one. Nope, website. And so for the youth workshops for this version, we can imagine doing some things that feel maybe inspired by vintage pennants. Next slide. A few examples of workshop collateral. Next slide. Awesome. So that was a very quick rundown of the 3 branding options that we've been studying. Our team and Becca's team was really into the first one, just because it can really adapt to so many audiences. This is obviously the vision plan is a years long project. So I think there's a lot of room for it to grow and adapt as the project changes. We would love your feedback. I'm not sure what the most efficient way to do this would be. We can also leave this with you if people think that's a safer bet. And we can flip back to anything you'd like to see again.
Well, I would start by saying thank you. I can tell you did a real lot of work on this, to put a lot of creative energy into it. And the 3 versions are really interesting and unique. I just was looking, I know that we have a building on one of our seals. I think it's Rings End though, isn't it? The Darien seal. It looks
Yeah,
remarkable.
Springs and Bridge.
Yeah, it looks remarkable. That building looks remarkably like the stable building. So that might be more overlap than we want. I think the animal one is really cute. And I think it probably really will appeal to children. And I think the other one it is Rings End, right? Yeah. It took me a little time to get it, but I like it. So those are my comments off the top. Team?
I echo that. Yeah, it was certainly evidences a lot of creative thinking. I know we spoke about the flag a little bit at the end of the meeting last time. I like the idea of the structure, but I think though, in terms of, proportion, when you look at the flag, it's almost completely enveloped by the building, which isn't really representative of everything that the island has to offer. So maybe some sort of change of scale, reducing the size of the building and putting other elements of the island into the flag. But I will also caveat that where I say that if there are creative endeavors, I'm really the last person you want to speak to.
We appreciate it. Thank you, Michael.
Dan?
Out of all those options, I prefer the first one as well. I think it seems to have more places it can go than the other two, and I've always kind of leaned towards that. I was a little curious the need to get this logo locked in so early. Could you explain that, please?
I'll take that question. We're thinking of this logo as the logo for this effort, right? So this doesn't necessarily have to be the logo for Great Island in perpetuity, but for the 1 year effort that we're all doing with the community, it's very, very helpful to have an identity. And I think as I think Celia has said, it can grow and change. And as we become more clear on the vision and then ultimately the plan, it can be replaced by something that feels more aligned with where we land, or it can be just adapted in some way that tunes it more effectively. But outreach, wants to feel like a big, consistent, wonderful, friendly, accessible, and energizing, basically unfolding of events over the course of a year. And so we need an attitude to get everybody excited and to come together. So that is probably helpful, I hope, to think of it as something that you're not committing to forever, but really for the duration of this process.
That really is helpful. Thank you.
And so, Becca, would the plan be to have stuff for this worksheet coming up on the 21st, perhaps logoed this way, partly?
Exactly.
Got it.
And I think, it's like we not everybody, but some people love souvenirs. And I think one of the things that we're very excited is to have people really feel like they're participating in the vision. And so we want there to be takeaway. And that's why we have a passport of activities, for instance, that we're developing as an activity. And so it needs to have a font. It needs to, we need pictures. We need a way to go forward. Same thing with, like, we really want to launch the website, right? And there has to be an approach to exactly how we convey that.
Since you brought that up, Becca, Monica hasn't asked me yet, but I did like the first one. And I'll say that having not liked the first time when I read it on my own, but the explanation that went with it made it all fit together. With regard to the passport, one thing I thought about as some of the items for the workshop were discussed is I was concerned about leave behinds, as in stickers and passports. We talked about trash earlier, so I know there's going to be a plan for that, but I just wanted to share with the group the idea of putting things in people's hands that could be left behind. This compounds our concern about trash.
I really liked it, everything I saw. I mean, the creativity is fantastic. Weaving all of the different facets of the island in, I think, are really amazing. And so great job on that. I love the cult, like you said, the blues and the greens and the things like that. I did just notice one thing with the kids stuff, the wording that you guys have chosen, explore the outdoors, adventure awaits, and wander. Those were 3 words that stuck with me. And I think that we as a committee really need to just make sure we think about that when we make these decisions on access, because I'm not sure that they're aligned right now.
Bruce, I had the same thought when I saw the word wander.
Allowed wander, but stay with your guardian. No, that's a great point. I think as we're developing these actual workshop materials, we would love constructive feedback like that. I think we can definitely swap out those words for now.
Well, I think they're good words.
Okay, who hasn't weighed in? Lori, what do you think of the logos?
All in all, I'm impressed. My brain doesn't work that way, so the fact that you came up with all these beautiful designs is just fabulous. I think I'm leaning towards the first one, a little bit simpler. I agree with what somebody else said about featuring the stable building too prominently right now, as opposed to just different bits and pieces of the island probably makes sense. And the first one with just the pictures sort of imposed behind the cutout, I thought let us capture lots of different either photographs or whatever, and use it in a flexible way. So I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, I think the first one, it took me a little bit, but you're kind of engaging your mind in not just a visual, but also in reading it, right, and interpreting it. Whereas the little critters, they're adorable, but I think you really need to see Great Island next to that to complete that message. So, Jeff, do you have any thoughts?
Well, actually, I like the flag the best just as a straight up logo, but I agree with what else has been said. I very much enjoyed the panoply of options that you could use with the G, and in general preferred the color palette that was used. So I'm fine with that. Like others have mentioned, I thought it was a little bit abstract at the beginning, just as a freestanding thing, but now I think it fits well together, and I think the stables and buildings can be otherwise highlighted in the materials. So I'm fine with that. I did have one other question, not to get us off, but I didn't see that we talked about the website launch in the first sub bullet under this item. Are we going to discuss that somewhere in this?
I would like for us to discuss that if we could.
Okay. My question, you showed in the presentation the a landing page. I didn't see that in the mock-up that we were sent. So could that be put back up? It was in the branding presentation. Oh, there, you just passed it. there.
I will just
So
add
is that what the landing page is roughly going to look like?
If we get a decision, basically, or like a direction, because maybe we can't actually have a decision, but if and I feel like Monica, the particular terms of what direction we're able to take from this, we would, if for instance, we can come to some level of clarity around moving ahead, at least provisionally, with the first option, then that allows us to basically have a landing page that is much more descriptive, Jeff, when we launch. Right now, it's all quite bland because we don't want to suggest one direction and then have to get rid of it and replace it.
So Becca, what I'm hearing is you would like some direction on the specific logo, and that will drive some of this. Okay. All right. So I think the only person we didn't hear from was Jim.
Yeah, I kind of leaned a little bit towards. I leaned a little bit towards the flag. I liked it. I think maybe the building could be a tad small and throw some other stuff on there. But I thought, the first letter was pretty unique as well. But I'd say I slightly favor the flag just because it'll probably be more recognizable outside of kind of Darien and with kids. But I like the ideas that you guys had here on the different color codings. Like I could see that sort of surviving over the next, kind of into perpetuity as we think about, the different colors representing different areas of the property you can go to. So I thought that was pretty unique, but all in all, that was a lot of good work.
I just have one more comment. When I first looked at the website, the URL was .com. And then now I'm seeing at the top of this page, it says greatisland.ct, but I like the Great Island CT better. I mean, .com is, is technically commercial. That's what .com was originally meant to mean. And I feel like, it is a town property. If we go down the governance route of like something where we're a different type of an entity, then I think this greatisland.ct is great. But for right now, I'm not sure that we shouldn't just use greatisland.darien.ct.gov and make it a record in the DNS that just points to this WordPress or whatever site it is. Because that authenticates the site instantly. That lets the user know that they're at an authoritative site for something from the town. And plus it's free. We don't have to pay for we don't have to pay for a separate. That's probably a minimal number of the domain registration, but it does authenticate the site as an entity of the town of Darien.
And Bruce,
And I think
probably a good idea to just get a few websites I manage. You just buy them all and have them all just splash you to the one that you want to prevent people from duping it.
Yeah, but when you put the Great Island in front of our town domain, you can have that point anywhere you want. It doesn't have to be part of our town website is what that's how DNS works.
Beth, any thoughts on that?
I think I think we actually may have procured more than one option, which we could even circulate the ones that we did. And maybe, Monica, if you could get in writing some of this additional feedback. I think we wanted to have something that was very straightforward, so it isn't cumbersome for people to type it in. And there is a website one already. So we were trying to come up with something that was very direct and immediate. I think your issues that you're raising about really wanting to make sure it feels authenticated, I think that is important. So I'm not sure I don't think we can resolve this in this format. And I wonder if there's a little bit more follow-up in terms of making sure that we get exactly the right address. But if we're going to buy more than one, potentially, I wonder if we release it as at least an initial one and it could continue to evolve. And maybe we think of it a little bit like the branding.
So use this one for now.
I think we would like to have a website that could get out for the public so we can start using it. And I think if there's a sense that there's a better or more secure or more long lasting way of doing it, we're incredibly open to that. I think the building of the website we're doing in an independent platform. So
Okay, so if Bruce puts in writing what he is thinking, you would like to see that sooner rather than later, so that if we need to change this, we can change it? Okay, all right, I'm sure Bruce will do that.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
does that make sense to you, Bruce, as a next step? Great,
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, any
Okay,
other
so-
need for
yeah.
discussion on this?
So Becca, do you need us to finalize? It sounds like some people like the flag, some people like the G. Do we want to make a decision today? Do we want to move forward?
I feel like what I was hearing is that particularly the two folks, Jim and Jeff, who like the flag, are open to us using the G, and that if we can find more ways to make the features of the flag and the flag present, potentially even over time it switches. I think there is something that with identity, and Celia, I think you said this so clearly, it's a whole package of ways of developing an identity. And it may be that as we work through this process, there is an identity that is a little bit more outside of Darien and one that's a little bit more inside, and that we get that a little bit closer. So, but I would like it if we could sort of in some way be clear that working with the first option and then using as much of what is strong and distinctive about the flag is what we hear. I think, Celia, do you agree that that would be really helpful for direction for us?
Yeah, thank you all for your really efficient feedback. I think the components of the flag that you liked can definitely be brought into the first. I think we're already thinking about doing some custom illustrations and banners, and I can see this being like a huge banner. So that makes sense to me.
Okay, is everybody okay with that? I can't see everybody, so you have to.
I'm fine with it, Jeff.
I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, Becca, you have possible futures?
Yes. And we've had a good time advancing this in ahead of the outreach meeting. So if we go to the next slide. We thought we would open by sort of saying that there's been, I think, a fair amount of activity and investigation, and there are a set of sort of programs or hopes for what people will find on the island that there's, a lot of interest in, and that it's been expressed pretty clearly. And so we just organized some of those here. These are not totally comprehensive list, but there are a set of active recreation things like the swimming pool or the swimming area, things like sailing that we know people are really interested in us looking closely at. Additionally, there are a set of cultural and ecological pursuits that, some are already available, like the bird watching, but in addition, maybe a community garden or an art center. And then there's a set of special programs like the pop-up polo event, but potentially a wedding venue or things in hospitality, festivals, things like that we're looking at. So all of those, we're seeking to understand and to make sure that we process the hopes of the community. I think as we go to the next slide, for us, when we have these conversations and when we have them with the community, actually, if you can back up one, sorry. Oh no, this is good. Okay, this is good. It is absolutely necessary to bring forward the question of what is it that makes Great Island so beloved? what is it that makes it such a remarkable place, and to ensure that we understand that. And so as we evaluate the different possible futures, we're always testing them against what's known and what we can't spoil or harm. And so I think some of the things that we do understand pretty clearly about what makes Great Island special, the really intricate topography and all the differentiated spaces that you find and you can explore, wander through. That's a major component. It's also something that provides like natural barriers and divisions between places. A second condition that we want to constantly return to and test things against is this idea of the water's edge, and just how important that very in and out edge to the water. It's not just a simple circle of an island. There is a lot to explore along the water's edge. And then the last thing that we thought makes this island particularly unusual are the relationships inside and out, both from the water back to the island, from the island out to the water, from the specific historic conditions and structures inside and outside. So we go to the next slide. There are also a set of approaches, sort of actions, that we want to understand how they're affected as we and prioritized as we test different futures. And so some of the things that have come forward as very clear desires and sort of values from the community are an interest in preserving nature, and an interest in experiencing water, making sure we celebrate the historic structures, we facilitate adventure, and we ensure financial viability. And so as we look at the different possibilities, again, we'll evaluate them by the different criteria. And one of the things we're going to be trying to work with the community on later this month is an understanding of how these different things work. And as you look at one thing, what are the impacts on some of these other conditions that people or experiences and values people have? Go to the next. So we thought we would walk through briefly, and we'll be doing this with the community, but there are some basic ways of having access, right? We talked about some of them earlier today, but there are a lot of choices as it relates to access. And so for a conversation in a basic way, we have looked at sort of walking, the pedestrian experience, and different ways of organizing that, and also the vehicle. So firstly, just as a brief overview, right, there's a way that you can really prioritize nature and have the most sort of modest impacts on the environment with how you organize your path sort of structure, but also even material condition. There's also a way in which you really prioritize having the major route of circulation for people along the water's edge, and you try and clear out as much movement as possible from the inside. We also, people are very interested in those historic structures, and so is there a way that actually going from structure to structure to structure is the goal? And then there's often wisdom in separating out different kinds of movement and different kinds of activity. So you avoid conflicts between different kinds of users. And so those are, solutions like that often look at sort of activity loops. And then the last thing that we wanted to put up as an idea of sort of program pathways. And so there might be a structure or a program, and there's a specific circuit that's really tied to that activity or that program. And so you have sort of little different sort of mini kingdoms, so to speak, on the island. We go to the next slide. We've already spoken in our meetings about the car and parking, but we want with the community to talk about ways of understanding how what the options are when you're bringing cars and parking onto the island. And so, there's the kind of two-way road option that still is as minimal as possible. And mostly the idea on the island is you're out of your car, vehicles aren't a big part of the experience there, and it's totally straightforward. There's another version where it's still very minimal. You come in the kind of historic way, and it's a one-way loop, and it's about the boathouse and water. Parking is very close to the polo field. Then there's an idea of a one-way loop, which allows us to be sort of have the least probable amount of impacts on the historic walls and conditions, and that's a loop system. An option that I think we've talked about in another meeting with you is the idea of coming a little bit further into the island and actually having parking by the stables, and still thinking about a loop. And then the distributed sort of maximizing parking, where you have two loops that take you through the entire island, and you have different parking with different areas. So this is the kind of set of possible logics we'll be talking to people about later at the outreach event. Next. And then helping understand sort of how they relate to what your conservation approach might be. If you're really trying to, for instance, like have a large patch of good habitat that isn't fragmented, how do you think about that? And this is just a set of ways of thinking about how you prioritize conservation on the island, pockets, the interior, the coast. And there are different champions for different approaches. If we get to the next. And similarly, looking at the sort of menu of options for preservation of the structures and beginning to talk about with the community some of the pros and cons and challenges if you keep all the structures, and the kinds of costs and programs that would, encumber the keeping of all the structures, versus something as radical as removing most of the structures and keeping, for instance, this is not likely to be a scenario that gets pursued, but just one or two or three buildings. Okay, next. And so we're also hoping to get people to talk a little bit more carefully if, for instance, they're really interested in this idea of preserving nature. And we understand there's other considerations. What are the set of programs that work with preserving nature? And this is, understanding of sort of those possible futures. Go to the next one. Water, next one. Within the structures themselves, some of these buildings really lend themselves to certain kinds of activities, and some don't. And so really starting to develop out that understanding. Go to the next. And then adventure and recreation, where do we see there might be good sites and opportunities for these different activities like pickleball or the ice rink, camp activities, things like that. Let's go to the next. And then I think, it's very clear that trying to get a balance sheet that makes sense to the community is a big priority. And so testing the different possibilities that can help us understand financial viability. And just to be clear, that the solution for financial viability is not just in the program, it's in the overall approach to how all these things come together. So we go to the next slide. The sense that some of these goals, if you really want to prioritize one thing over another, they go together a little bit better. So there is a kind of selection process by which you start to say, okay, if I really care about this, then that, and I want to prioritize that, that leads me to understand I might have to forego or give up something else. And I think our goal very much on the 21st is not to ask people to make any decisions, but to start to understand how, if you really care about one thing, you need to really relate it to a set of other things that are impacted or go with it or don't go with it, so that people start to build up their capacity to make a really good decision. Go to the next slide. That, I think we should break for a little bit of discussion right now.
Thoughts, committee?
I think it's great. I think it looks fantastic. I love the optionality that you've presented. I think it's thought provoking, which is what it's supposed to be. Can't have it all, obviously, but it covers the bases, I think, very well. And I think it looks to me like we're on the right track to ending up with a thoughtful master plan at the end of the process. I don't want to get necessarily branded the parking guy, but the parking that I brought up at the last meeting, that boathouse loop, is exactly what I was envisioning. So I think that we certainly can't wait till the master plan is completed till we decide exactly how we're going to do that, because if we do that, then we're not going to have anybody driving on the island for the next year and a half or 2 years. But so I would propose that we put on our agenda to form some sort of working group that somehow says, okay, that boathouse loop really doesn't put cars on the property. It brings them in very minimally. It's a one-way thing. It's safe, so that if you've got it's safer necessarily because you don't have two cars trying to pass as people are walking the road, at the same time. So that I like the idea of a one-way, and I like the idea of keeping the island, at least certainly for now, pretty much pristine of cars, is that you just bring them into where that boathouse is. But I think, when we talked during the interview process, we talked about low-hanging fruit or quick wins. And I think with 23A about to break ground, and it will be done before we know it, we really have to fast track some sort of option for parking. And I really do like that one.
So where would that parking be relative to the boathouse?
Across the street. You know how right now across the street from the boathouse, basically right across from the dam, if you look there's kind of these low scrub evergreen type bushes that are it's this kind of pineish area of these weird looking bushes. And in fact, that was used by the Zigglers for parking and stuff when they had people in there in the old days when they operated Ziegler's Cove as a quasi marina. And people who had their boats out there, they all parked in there anyway. So it's a very natural, lends itself very naturally. And if we were to do something temporarily, I think you just put some split rail fence around an area, and you put some chopped rock down, and if it becomes a permanent parking lot after the master plan comes out, then maybe it changes. But at least we don't spend a lot of money and we don't do a whole lot, but we at least get access to some people who have, handicap permits, or moms and dads with strollers and things like that, that really are.
Would the cars be visible from the water?
No,
They're not really, which is kind of
No.
remarkable, Lori. And it
Okay.
basically was, I think what he's sharing is it was already graded in, and there is an
Okay.
old road that goes up the hill. So I think in terms of relatively minimal change or investment, it feels like it sort of lends itself to that. And you don't have to we don't have to worry about the two-way challenge that is a challenge on the island. But I think we shouldn't, I think our hope for this conversation right now is not necessarily to spend too much time about the specific alternatives, but actually more on which there'll be ample time to do. And the whole point of the 21st is to actually have people really spend as much time. And I think as you guys are focused on this, by all means, lots and lots of time. But the hope is to say, this is the array, but you can't think about these things in isolation. You really need to think about them in relationship one to the other, and to give people a chance to ask questions about, like, so what do you mean? And when you say this, and we'll be there with all of our experts and enthusiasm to really engage people in different ways to help them understand what these choices are.
I thought that it was an excellent presentation. It gives a wide array of things to think about. It's like you left enough breadcrumbs, literally or figuratively, all around the island for people to see the various possibilities. So I applaud that effort and that work product.
Yeah, you really helped give some structure to how we should think about this, Becca. So.
Yeah. One of the questions, I'm not sure, did you guys send around this presentation? I'm not sure what page number this is, but what's the page right before this?
I don't have the
Okay,
I don't have my page numbers, but the page right before it is the financial viability one.
Go forward 2 more pages. Back to where you were. I thought that page was really good. I mean, our group, we had a little working group discussion, and I think one of the things that became I thought was very valuable when we're engaging folks in these upcoming meetings is, rather than very specifically, like, do you want a tennis court or do you want this, was this notion of how are you thinking about this between, let's just say, active recreation and very passive sort of bird watching, sort of along that spectrum. And I felt like this page right here, kind of gets people thinking or reacting to, well, how many cars do you want to see driving on the island? How much do you want to see conserved? How much do you want to see active? So I actually thought that was a very tough thing to try to elicit. And I think you did a pretty good job on this page right here. I wouldn't mind, maybe even seeing like another page or way that we engage people where you do kind of use things like recreation, like on one side, like, dirt bikes, and on the other side, watching birds, but just to get people's idea to tell us, how do you envision us using the island? Lots of structures, lots of commercial activity, or very little commercial activity, or somewhere in the middle where it's open for residents, right? So I think if maybe you could take what you've done here with nature and have another page that somehow engaged people that way, that would be a good, might be helpful.
I think that's great. With the sort of, in terms of, Meg is about to talk about this, I do want to make sure she gets a chance to talk too. But one of the things that you'll see in her part of the presentation, and I know you previewed it already, is we're going to have easels set up for people, and we're going to have these sort of workshop stations. So we're making a big model, and they're going to be fun activities sort of in the center of the court of the tables. But then we're going to have these sort of expert science fair panels, both at Town Hall and on Great Island. And we're just talking about how do we make it feel real and imaginable. And so I think what you just shared, Jim, is exactly where we are, and sort of making sure that people can sort of see and picture, like, okay, if I really want to go for a run, but my friend is like checking out endangered birds, do those things go well together? Yes, probably, or not, but to sort of make it so it's really easy for people to picture what we mean by that. So I love that comment. Yeah. Any other comments right now, or anything you really want us to do differently?
In terms of development, I think even like the notion of like the coastal walk, right? Are people envisioning something that's on one end of the spectrum, formed concrete with railings and very, setting aside like ADA access, very sort of finished, or something much more like what we have at Cherry Lawn, a lot of other parks where it's, kind of rocks, undulating topography and so forth, or something a little bit more natural. I think getting people's ideas of kind of where they are on those spectrums, I think would be helpful.
I feel like maybe we could cut out flashcards or pictures of these things, of like, what do people feel like exactly like you're just suggesting from other parks and places. Seems very helpful.
It's like the pain threshold when you go to the hospital, you break your arm. It's either a happy face or a very unhappy face, or kind of where you are in the middle.
Right. Okay. But you know what? I just have an eye on the clock. So.
Thank you, Monica. If there aren't more comments and basically you feel that we're well prepared, that's great. Take it away, Meg.
Okay, great. Thank you, Becca. So moving on to focus groups, if you go to the next slide. So as I mentioned in our discussion during the last GIAC meeting, we are intending to have key focus groups with the community. These are going to be basically meetings that we have with representative members of the community as we're working through our discovery and familiarization phase on several topics. So education, water, ecology and nature, youth, transportation, governance and revenue, and history and preservation. And you'll see that we've gone ahead and reserved times for when these meetings will be held via Zoom. If you go to the next slide, we're just going to show you quickly sort of templates of what these agendas might look like for each of these discussions. So for example, for the education discussion, this will be Rita Hildebrand and Atelier Cho Thompson. Possible topics for the agenda will be observations and analysis, education programming opportunities. If you go to the next slide, relative to water, this would be, again, ourselves meeting with Langen, and possible topics on the agenda would be observations and analysis of the site, flood and coastal regulations, opportunities for water recreation and access. Next slide, relative to ecology, this would be ourselves and biohabitat. We would be discussing, potentially analysis of existing ecologies and conservation approaches and opportunities. You go to the next slide. For our youth discussions, this would be ourselves and again, Atelier Cho Thompson. And, possible topics would be, again, observations and analysis, but then additionally opportunities for engaging with youth, which we think would be great. On to the next slide. Transportation, this would be ourselves and Langen. And possible topics on the agenda would be transportation and access options, test fits similar to what we just saw, and opportunities for parking, docks, shuttle stops. Next slide. For preservation, this would be ourselves paired with night architecture, and possible topics would be history of the site inventory of existing structures, and opportunities for preservation. And then for governance and revenue, this would be ourselves and James Lima, planning and development, and topics would be governance and revenue options, programming, test bits. You go to the next slide. Moving on to our outreach and events. So as mentioned last time, we are still gearing up for our community engagement session on September 21st. As we mentioned, the morning session will be at Town Hall from 10:15 to 12 p.m. The afternoon session will be on Great Island from 1:30 to 4, with shuttles provided to help get people to the island. You go to the next slide. And then we wanted to just briefly talk about both the survey and kind of the day of survey and boards that we're going to be having on site. So as part of the outreach, we will be having on easels boards as part of our activity station. So we're going to just talk through quickly some of our workshop boards. And we're thinking about these as, in progress workshops. What you're seeing here are some of the board templates, and I'll walk you through them. So there will be basically, 5 topics we'll address. It'll be program, water, access, ecology, and history and architecture. So if you go to the next slide, for example, the first board, this might be just a general welcome board. And it might ask some general questions on it, like, what do you like? What do you wish? What do you wonder? What is something special to you about Great Island? We think it's wonderful to ask, have you been to Great Island before today? And if so, how many times since it was acquired by the town? And then we might also ask, based on your vision and your visits to Great Island, how often do you think you will visit Great Island? Daily, weekly, monthly, occasionally? So this is kind of a nice way for people to walk up to a board, basically, on an easel, and they can write comments on sticky notes. They could put pins in key places to indicate key responses within the board. It's just a nice way of capturing sort of day of feedback from visitors to the island. If you go to the next slide. So for example, talking about programs, this board gives us the opportunity to talk about general themes related to programming, such as education, recreation, civic opportunities, health and wellness, sustainability and ecology, history and culture. private use, hospitality, food and beverage. So, you know, we can ask them very pointed and specific questions on these boards for visitors to respond to. Next slide. Again, similarly with water, you know, what some of the opportunities are for water-based activities that visitors might envision for Great Island. You go to the next slide. And then access, for example, you know, what are some local public open spaces you have visited in the past? And you might, you know, on this board, we'll have an aerial plan, right, where you can place a pin on the location of the map of Darien and the surrounding towns of the green open spaces you've been to. And then we might ask, how do you envision getting to Great Island? It's helpful for us to understand if the majority of people will be traveling by foot, bike, car, public transportation, or perhaps even boat. And on the next slide, related to ecology and nature, you know, we're really excited to ask questions about what animals and plants have been observed on site and how visitors feel about preserving the ecology and the wildlife, and what nature educational opportunities visitors might imagine for Great Island. If you go to the next slide. Similarly with history and architecture, you know, we really want to learn what existing structures on site visitors like the most, and we would ask them to place a pin in that location, and what some of the outdoor activities are that they might imagine for Great Island. You go to the next. This then is our general survey, and this is a survey, so, you know, this will have a QR code that will be on that welcome board. It will also be available to the public via the website and via social media. And this is meant to be, you know, a general survey for the public that's really kind of all encompassing. And it means that people who were on the site that day can take this survey, but also perhaps people who weren't able to visit the site during this community engagement session have the opportunity to take this survey digitally and provide feedback for us there. So we think this is a comprehensive way of capturing both day of in-person feedback from the community on the site, but also capturing, you know, information through a digital survey from community members within Darien who weren't able to participate locally. And I think we can stop here. I think this is the last slide. So we have a couple of minutes now for discussion.
Mike, I just noticed one thing on one of the slides. You said food will be available all day.
I think that's we're catching some typos in our deck, Monica, so that's going to be corrected.
Okay, okay. Because I think we landed on the ice cream idea was interesting, but, you know, pretty expensive. So
correct. We
right.
decided apples. Apples would be of the season, and water for refreshments, and that would be just a nice, healthy way of keeping everybody awake and happy.
And then are you still thinking coffee and something at Town Hall?
Correct. We're likely going to offer coffee, and, you know, we don't know yet whether it's a pastry or a donut or whatever the case might be, but at the very least coffee and hopefully some type of edible in the morning for, you know, refreshments.
Okay, and then sticking with logistics, you're expecting the town to provide the chairs for the presentation on the island? What else are you looking for from us?
I think it's helpful to have some chairs on the island for visitors who might need kind of a moment to pause or who might want to rest, but I don't anticipate that we are going to have only seating. I think we're going to have some visitors standing, some visitors seating. So I don't know, Becca, how many chairs do you think we need?
We'll get you that. We do, I think, have agreement about our final layout. So I think I think it's probably 3 tables and chairs to go with that. But we've tried to keep it as simple as possible.
And we can send that layout to you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Any thoughts, team?
Monica, where's he going to be set up, the workshops on the island? I know in Town Hall, we're probably going to use one of the bigger rooms, but on the island.
Town Hall, we're going to do it in the auditorium, and the tables will be set up down below and in front of the stage. And then we're going to do it at the stables, outdoors if it's nice, and indoors if it's not so nice. Or Becca, do you want to do it indoors no matter what?
No, we're assuming that it's out. We really like just in terms of the acoustics issues that we all discovered, or many of us did together, and sort of building code and safety issues, we're much more excited to do it outside in that court. So inside the gates, but in the outdoor court. And the idea is that there'll be a children's activity, a sort of chalk activity, making use of the asphalt that's there. And we'll have the big model and some plans and an activity around that. And then under the overhang in front of the stables, we'll have these easels with these boards and the sort of experts for people to walk around science fair style. And if they really want to understand more about, parking, for instance, they'll have a chance to really do that there.
You'll have enough people so that if people don't want to actually go on the walk, they can stay and there'll be somebody they can talk to.
Correct.
Yeah.
We'll be having people, yes, we'll be having people monitoring stationed at the boards to engage with visitors, and also people leading the tours. So every opportunity will be staffed.
Okay, and then you, on the day of survey, that's not really a survey as in we're handing out any paper, but your recap on the survey material, does that include the general survey? And can you give us an idea of what that looks like, timing wise?
We'll keep the general survey open for 3 weeks is our goal, so that people have a chance to respond, even if they wanted time to think, or for whatever reason they even couldn't, they couldn't come to the event themselves, but they want a chance to revisit and go back on the weekend and, respond that way. And then we'll report out to you at the next meeting.
Okay, and then are you pretty comfortable with the next workshop being, 6 weeks away?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's helpful for us. I think the goal, thanks for raising that, Monica. I think the goal of this workshop is to set the terms and to give everyone a framework for understanding things. I think what's clear is that we're hoping that even after the event and as we started to understand things, there are certain agreements that will come forward, that certain things are just really, really important to the majority of people. And then we can sort of show what that means. And then there are going to be a bunch of things where there isn't consensus and there needs to be more homework, right? And we need to have maybe some tougher conversations, but we'll be able to get into those a little bit. And so I think the hope would be that November conversation, we start to be able to make at least a few decisions and get a kind of bead on the direction that we're all headed together.
And then on the focus group, would it be helpful if the committee came up where we see these categories, so we know in town there are certain groups, organizations that might have a member? I'm guessing you would like one member from an organization, not 5 members from an organization, right? Okay, so it would be helpful if maybe the committee came together and supplied you with a list of community organizations and groups. Okay, we'll work on that.
And I think if there are specific individuals who are just recognized as real leaders in an area, this is a moment of partnership where, and I mean, so in some cases, maybe the organization puts forward who they think, but if there are people, we want this to be cultural organizations, government, grassroots. It's meant to be a broad intersection of people who have shared concerns and expertise in the community.
Any more questions for Becca or Meg on these items?
The afternoon session, what will the tour consist of?
So there'll be an architectural tour, and I think and there'll also be an ecology tour.
Be a water tour.
So the idea is to take people and sort of give them a little bit of background and to point some things out that they might not see or understand on their own.
So there's different tours?
There are multiple tours, yeah.
There will be a tour for, go ahead.
The idea is that they're not enormous, right? So there might, if there are 8 people or 10 people or 15 people who are interested in understanding more about the architecture, they can participate in that. If there are people who really are interested in like the coastal walk and really understanding more about the water, they get to go on that one.
Or an ecology tour.
And we want people to experience the island. So the tours are a really nice, in our experience, they're a really nice way to get people to feel more connected to the island itself. But people don't have to do that. It's voluntary.
All of options. Okay, if there are no more questions for Rebecca and Meg, I think that the getting more people onto the island, that's a great segue back to the pop-up polo event. So I think I covered the highlights, but I think we were looking for some input from the committee. So does anyone have any thoughts?
I think it sounds like a great event.
Okay.
Yeah, I was
Okay.
able to join Monica when she met with the individuals who are running this. They have experience doing it. So they're basically going to run point with most of it. So, you know, there shouldn't be a lot of burden on the town, although I know Monica's engaged the Park and Rec staff because as we heard Bruce testify at the beginning of the meeting, they know what they're doing on these things. But it would be a nice way if we can get a nice fall day to get some folks onto the island and get the sense of what it would feel like to have some kind of, one-time event and get some learnings from how that would go. But doing that in partnership with people who have done this before.
Yeah, that's what I think is most important is the lessons that we're going to learn from it and how we can use that on down the road.
And,
Yeah, I agree.
Monica, this will come up, I mean, I think at our selectmen meeting, obviously, when we talk about this soon, and we're pretty confident that this is a really zero cost event to the town.
Yes, it's not like your house where, Mike, you can spend a little bit more and figure it out. Town runs a pretty tight budget, talking to Kate right here. So, yes, that's part of the deal.
So the only thing I would ask along Mike's line of questioning is just about like insurance. Does this organization who's bringing the horses, will they be providing like a certificate of insurance? Do they have liability if something were to happen with, God forbid they burn the barn down or something, that under their custody, care, custody, and control, something happens?
Yes, we will. Yes, we have requirements and they will need to meet that for sure.
Okay, yeah, I think that's probably the only one that really jumps up out at me.
Yeah,
So
Monica,
financially, how are we doing this? Are we effectively like leasing the stables to them for 5 days and that'll have sort of how they have to leave it when they leave and they pay a certain amount, or are we paying them to come here and then just hoping that residents or donors sort of reimburse us? Like how does that work in terms of just like the cash flows?
Well, there's no cash flow on our end. They'll bring the ponies over a couple of days in advance. I spoke with Ed and the thinking was it might be best to actually have a groomsman stay in one of the apartments above the stables, but the care of the horses will be on them. The cost that I see the town absorbing in the past when we do these kind of events is the transportation, and I've explained that that we're not prepared to do that. So this feels like something that will not cost the town. We're not making anything, Jim. I'm sorry, but we're also not spending anything.
So to me, no one's paying them to come do this; they're just kind of doing it as a community service.
Correct.
Okay, and then on the if we're going to sell a limited amount of tickets, like 200, like how will that be like a pop-up like website? We sell them on a website or offer them on a website? Is this free of charge to residents?
Free of charge. So the big question would be, I think that the one control will be if we use the same model as we're using for the buses for the 921 event, we'll have 216 people that will move onto the island. And then, of course, people can walk on. But the control will be the transportation out there. But there's no cost. If you walk on
is the thinking that we just open it up to folks, like we say, like 9 a.m. on a Monday morning, you can log on to the Parks and Rec website and sign up for it, or is it like how are we going to govern this? Because I imagine something like this. I go to the one in Greenwich and there's thousands of people. So
Right. We'll do that. I'm looking forward to figuring out the specifics with Park and Rec on how the reservation system works. But yes, it'll be something like that.
And wait, I'm sorry, I think you said this and I just missed it, but how are we paying for the buses?
We're not. They are.
Oh, they are. Okay. Oh, that's really nice.
Now one option might be that we charge a nominal fee, but we need to wrap this up because we have a Board of Selectmen meeting in 2 minutes. So I don't want to rush you. If you're not prepared to move on this, we will not move on it. It just means that we won't do it until probably earliest would be next spring, because there is a lot to be done between now and October 26th. So I guess you know what I'm going to do.
When's our next meeting?
Our next meeting
on the 18th?
It's the 18th.
Yes, we have one on the 18th, but this was sort of this meeting I wanted to have at this time so that Reed would have enough time with whatever decisions we made to incorporate them, the logo, the survey, that kind of thing.
But if we don't vote on it tonight and pass it, then it's not going to happen this fall. Right?
It won't happen this fall.
In the interest of time, can I make a motion that we
Sure.
vote on it?
Sure, you can make a motion that the Great Island Advisory Committee approves the pop-up polo event as presented and further requests that the Board of Selectmen approve the event as presented.
So moved.
Mike, you second?
Oh, second. Sorry, apologize.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, all right, terrific. Hey, Kate, we're out of time. Is it okay if I do not do minutes at this meeting?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, all right, we'll skip the minutes. We'll do it next time. Beth, I'll get your name corrected. That's the only mistake I saw. Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn? Mark moves, Mike seconds, all in favor? Okay, meeting's adjourned at 7 o'clock. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.